All right. Rick and I are here.
Welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Jamie Lowell, Rick Thompson, and nobody else.
Yeah, again, without a bunch of people, but we'll have a lot to come on throughout the show, and we'll talk about a bunch of stuff. And next week, of course, we're already talking about kind of doing a year in review or trying to at least highlight some important stuff throughout the year and what went on. But let's check out the awesome sponsors and get underway.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Botanical Company. Love those guys. Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com, plus custom 420 promos.
Perfect.
I know.
Yeah. Everybody come back next year, and might be a couple new ones in there too.
This is, by the way, season 5, episode 51. Hi, Ashley.
So you know the significance of Ashley right off the bat, right, Rick? Or is that connecting for you?
Sure. I'm fascinated by her eyes. That's fine. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. I'm sure you checked those out over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to go get tacos across the parking lot from the cave every Tuesday at Michnos, and she was our primary server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she knew exactly what we like to order. She was willing to tolerate Jamie's incessant and unfunny dick jokes, so it was great. Yes, right.
And or Rick's, and or Ray's.
That's true. Ray was the dick joke champion, to be honest.
Probably not Colin so much. No, he never really, I guess, found the value in getting involved in that too much. But
the youngest member of our group was the most mature, which doesn't surprise me considering who we are. And Deb, of course, Deb's just funny no matter what the subject is. She just kills it.
So last week Ida was on, and we talked about the telethon and the gala a little bit, and MICIA and all that kind of stuff, and that was cool. And of course, those things then did ensue, and we'll talk about those later on. We had Paul on. He's been on for like 5 shows in a row, and we just might get blessed again with his presence here later on today. And there's relevant stuff to talk about along those lines, and lots of stuff. We also may hear from attorney Barton Morris and from Josey Scoggin. If not others, we'll see what happens. Last night on Medical Mondays, Pony Boy came on. He came into town to help out with some holiday, an event where toys were collected for kids and things like that. A holiday benefit event. And he was on to talk about that last night, and that went on in the midst of a lot of the stuff that we participated in. And then there were other things up in Flint that were going on. And from what I can tell from around the horn, there was just just so much goodwill and so many things that came together. We're gonna have Josie on it, and the stuff that Sons and Daughters and GLEN and stuff is huge. This is one of their better years. This is being around for a while, becoming kind of trusted, doing a lot of good work. And then the industry kind of producing some things and looking for these types of opportunities to help out, and it comes together really well. And I'd like to get a report from her, but I know that she's excited about being able to help out so many people.
But one of the things we're not mentioning is that when we talk about Pony Boy is the lead singer for the internationally famous band Los Marijuanos. Mm-hmm. So if you're wondering why we made so much of a deal of him coming into town, they're a Las Vegas-based band or California-based band, I can't recall which. So for them to come to Michigan's actually a pretty big deal. And he's just so fun. The guy's always positive. Even when he's ripping on people, he's still having fun and laughing. And if you've never seen a Los Marijuanos concert, you really should. These guys have a blast when they're playing their instruments. It's great stuff.
He was hanging out with Bernie from 420 Promotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned, while they are not sponsors of Medical Mondays, they were sponsors of us. We slipped that in last night during the conversation. But it was I thought it was a pretty decent show last night. It was as you said, he's a very entertaining dude, and he got into it. Also, they had I unfortunately forgot the guy's name, but he's the one of the main dudes from In-House Genetics. And he's been around, just similar to some of these other national companies that have been able to see how these things play out in different states. And
what's up, Rodney? Adam Brook. Adam Brook tells us that Pony Boy just lost his mom. So that makes the holidays even more challenging. So when someone who's in the midst of personal tragedy takes time out of their world to come out and try and make sure everybody else has a good holiday, even though they're suffering, to me, it means a lot more.
Yeah,
so thank you for letting us. Thanks, Adam, for giving us that insight.
Yeah. Right on. So anyway, what else we got here? Yeah, so I mean, I guess I just wanted to point out lots of different things to talk about within that little discussion, but there were just a lot of places around the state, cannabis related, doing things to help people out over these holidays, and a lot of them seems like all of them seem as though they were very successful.
Well, when you get people who are by their very nature, people who are promoters of healing and those folks that are willing to give you a gentle shoulder to rest your head upon when you are downtrodden from the weight of the world, those are the people that are likely to carry forth and do good things during a holiday season, and also during the whole year. It doesn't have to be a holiday season for people like that to do well. And there's really no corporate incentive in our community to do things like feed the homeless or provide presents to kids whose parents are incarcerated. The people that do that, they just do it. And you have to love them for it.
Well, and a lot of us were doing it before it was like mandated as part of a formula for getting a license and having a social equity plan and community outreach, and that's that type of thing. So
one of the things we've been talking to Director Brisboe about in our consumer connection meetings on a monthly basis is, having some of those social equity plans revealed publicly, making it not an option, making everybody's social equity plans public. In order to achieve an adult use license, you have to file a social equity plan. But some of the social equity plans are stupid. Like, I will hire people from the local community so that I can increase a payback to the city. No, that's not a social equity plan. That's just the way that you conduct business. Certainly doesn't address some of the issues. So, and Adam Brook writes, for those people on Alexa and Spotify and our podcast network, Adam writes, for many decades, our donations were not welcomed by many groups. And the man is right. The fact is, we tried really hard to do good things in 9 and 10 and even in 11, and people wouldn't accept our assistance because they were worried that it was somehow tainted or that we were buying good presents for needy children with drug money.
And things were really rough, especially shortly after the act passed. I mean, as far as economy goes, jobs, and I remember a couple of years in, some activity taking place, some demonstration of how it's kind of working, and somebody from, I guess a couple of years in, because Schutte was in office, and somebody from Schutte's office, and I forgot the press guy. If I saw the name, I would recognize it again because I saw it so often back then. But the response was the spokesman from the Attorney General's office, when Bill Schutte was the Attorney General, was, but we don't want those kinds of jobs. It's the same thing. We don't want that money that's tainted or whatever. It did take a long time to break that stigma. A lot of now, I think it still exists, of course, but a lot of that has been diffused.
People that walk into the hi Susan, people that walk into this industry in 2020, 2021, or 2022, they really have no idea what we struggled with in 9, 10, and 11. And Adam Brook will be the first guy to tell you that if you walked into the industry in 9, 10, and 11, you have no idea what kind of struggles they had to deal with in the 80s and the 90s. And he's absolutely right. Every time we step forward, we take a step up on a staircase towards acceptance. And the fact is, we're just at a place right now where a lot of the stuff that we had to deal with in the past just is a non-factor anymore. And let me just say one thing too. There's a value to doing good when no one's watching. If you have good in your heart, you do it every time you get an opportunity to, whether there's a camera there, whether someone notices or not, you're just helpful. However, there's a value to making sure that people know exactly what you're accomplishing. When we talk about trying to break the stigma or change the way that people perceive cannabis industry, they need to see stories like 1,000 frozen turkeys given away at Lighten Up Provisioning Center by the Hero Project. They need to see 17 or 18 families adopted by Sons and Daughters United this year in order to be able to give presents to kids who need it. They need to see Clean Smoke Initiative and the Cannabis Freedom Coalition helping out, Maurice Shoemate's family to the degree that we are and that we have. And they need to see stories like Rudi Gammo getting out of jail, potentially. He has a hearing coming up, and we'll talk about that today.
Yeah.
Those are the things that, in order for us to advance the way that society looks at us, we are obligated to a certain degree to brag about the things that we do very well. And Adam, again, had another comment earlier. Jamie, if you would do me a favor and pull up Adam's most recent comment so that I could read that live for everyone. He wrote, how about the years when we were still underground and illegal, and places like the American Cancer Society would return our donations? Absolutely true. It happens. And this is one of the reasons why when Kevin Spittler and the Med Joint were able to donate tens of thousands of pounds of food to Loaves and Fishes food pantry in the Kalamazoo area, it was such a remarkable event. When we walked as cannabis individuals with, unfortunately, Rep. Carlton at that time as the muscular dystrophy a charity walk, and awards and prizes were given to cannabis-related industries. It was revolutionary. It changed things.
He says, unfortunately, Rep. Cold, because we started off with a really good relationship with them and did some good work for a little while. And then there was some big money interest that came into play. The same story, I guess, that we revert to. That reminds me a little bit of that California situation. There's this obvious and clash of coming to heads of the commercial license system and the other activity that's going on, alternative, black market, legacy, whatever the different terms are that people are comfortable with. But the move that's being discussed, and I think it fits with some of the discussions that we've had with the big money interests, or when we've been able to talk about what else to do besides try to stamp out a whole program that's been going on for a long time and has kind of demonstrated itself to be important in terms of the caregiver system. Let's work to reduce a lot of the restrictions and regulations that we have and be able to conduct business, more freely and be more competitive in that way. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they're talking about in California is reducing limitations on stores and licensing and reducing tax and trying to not make the alternative markets as far as price and things like that to be as attractive. And I'd rather see that than try to go after people and try to bust them left and right.
I agree with that. California is unique from Michigan and from other Midwestern states.
We'll go with black market for the purposes of this discussion.
Adam Brook doesn't like the term legacy market. He likes the term black market, although in our industry, in the industry that we live in and work in right now, oftentimes the term black market is not a welcome phrase because it has some racist overtones. Some people like to pronounce it one way, and some people like to say it the other. But in California, if we look at what's going on right now, they have what's called distribution licenses. So there's a cultivator and there's a retailer, and then there's a guy in between who essentially can wholesale cannabis. He can buy a whole bunch of it from the cultivator, sit on it for 6 months, and then move it from then to retailers if he chooses to. Sometimes people will get these distribution licenses using fraudulent identities or with fake information. They call them burner dispo licenses. So you can purchase up a whole bunch of cannabis from regulated licensed facilities and then just drop your distribution license and then transfer all that cannabis into the black market. Now, of course, it's illegal to do that, but apparently a lot of people are doing that. So if we look at what California is dealing with right now, they have some circumstances that we don't have here in Michigan. The reason we don't have those distribution licenses is sitting right to my right on your screen. And that's Jamie Lowell, Jeff Hank, Adam Brook, Robin Snyder, those of us who are just outside that inner circle. Those
Matt Abel, Dan Groh.
Yep, Dan Groh, Ryan Basor, myself, a lot of the people that had input were really warning that this was a gateway towards exclusivity and towards a level of control we didn't want. The alcohol industry has that. It's called their distributorship. So you got a beer distributorship. No one else can distribute beer in a particular protected area because they've paid for the right to exclusively deliver beer in that zone. And that's what we wanted to avoid with this. And in California, they were not able to avoid that. And now they have this major problem.
Ironically, it was that kind of vision by some of the big money interests that even got things moving here in Michigan.
Yeah.
The MMFLA happened under the legislature. And it was because there were some people that thought there was some good opportunity there, and it could be contained with, the
MMFLA was probably not going to become a reality unless the MI Legalized program was successful. And MI Legalized in 2016 collected over 300,000 signatures in order to put our ballot proposal on the ballot. And even though we were still wrangling in court, the legislators took a look at that and said, you know what, we need to craft something here and put it down in place just to make sure that we have it. And the MMFLA was created to create corporate advantage, which it did a pretty good job of. Kept barriers to entry high, kept payments high.
They wanted the tiered system. They wanted it to be,
Sure
they wanted to be only, 8 distributors or 10 distributors. And you get one of those licenses, you start printing your own money.
They wanted no home grows. And then at one point, Marijuana Policy Project was trying to advocate for only 2 plants apiece for home cultivation. And we very quickly told them that there's no way we were going to endorse a program that included less plant cultivation privileges than we have in the medical program. So right. I was just on a program on Friday, the Green Rush Live, where I was talking to people from around the United States, and they all praised Michigan's possession limit. When you talk about 12 plants, it's pretty generous compared to a lot of other states where it's 4 or 6. It works for us. It really does. And this state is an example of how things, generally speaking, work pretty well. We can point to other states like Illinois or Ohio where they have some serious issues with their legalization programs. But here in Michigan, we're actually very fortunate. I know we like to tweak it, and I know we like to complain about our program because it could be better. And that's the process by which we make a better program. But man, compared to Indiana or some of the other states, we got it pretty good.
We do, and I want to appreciate that and realize that and understand that we've made a lot of gain and all that kind of stuff. But I have heard people use that as an excuse for us not improving our condition here, and I just want to make sure that's not the mindset. That's not the approach that we'll take. There's a lot of room for improvement here. Even though we have one of the better programs, that's not a time for complacency. Yep.
By the way, I just want to note that Dr. Nina Robb is watching us today. Dr. Robb, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We've got a lot of celebrities watching today. Adam Brook is, of course, Mr. Hashbash.
Instead of just being on here with us, he's just spending the time typing in the contributions, so that works too.
Yeah. You know what? However people feel comfortable. Not every time do I feel like I want to be on video, but since I look so damn good, it's hard for me not to video up every week. So
does that suggest anything about Adam, or necessarily?
I was thinking more about you, but
Okay.
Adam's a handsome man. Adam's got all those chains around his neck. He's very old school and new school at the same time. Yep. Adam says, yippies believe there's no such thing as a good pot law. Well, if you believe that there should be no laws regulating cannabis at all, then no pot law is a good law. I think that in American society and in world society right now, it might not be very realistic to expect that we'd have a commerce-ready product like cannabis available and there would be no regulations around it completely. Oh, Adam's putting the blame on Jamie.
I thought I did. No. My fucking fault. If that's the case, my fault.
Him out. All right. AB, let it go. Let it fly. Get on the video, man. Adam, for those of you that don't know, Adam does a what he likes to call a proof of life video every morning. And if you haven't tuned in to Adam Brook's morning videos, you're missing out. They're free. It's on Facebook. Check out his Facebook page, Adam Brook. Usually like I don't know, 8, 9, 10 in the morning, something like that. You can catch him. He plays great music. He talks about real stuff. And more than anything else, the comments that come in really are just so hilarious. Ryan Bringold reminds us that tonight, Dexter, which is a community in Washtenaw County, is considering an ordinance which would regulate caregivers, which I think we all agree is just an absolute horrible.
It's that stupid, you got to have 5 acres to be able to grow even inside thing. They tried that in Genesee. This is the second reading. It's getting really close. It's so wildly inappropriate. So different than something that you could consider to be reasonable, I think. It's definitely challengeable. It's not frivolous to challenge that.
Jen Bronson's been doing a great job of keeping people updated as to what the ordinance includes and how it affects things. Oh, we got a twofer. All of a sudden, Jim and Adam jumped in on the line. That's fantastic.
Just after 4:20 as well. We were a little busy.
There you go.
Excuse accepted. Sure. Yep. So we've got a lot of things going on in Michigan right now. Even over the holidays, it's not something that we can fall asleep on. If you take a couple weeks off cannabis law reform, when you come back, you had a lot of extra work. And Detroit Dream Chasers says there's a lot of people trying to control something that they don't understand. I think most people would agree that that's true of government in general. I know a lot of people that think that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't know a goddamn thing about fish or wildlife, and people that the Michigan Department of Natural Resources don't know anything about natural resources. Now, clearly, there's scientists in both of those companies or agencies that know a hell of a lot more than the average guy. But I think all of us on a citizen level have a natural distrust of government. Certainly, if you've been in the cannabis industry for a while, you have a reason to distrust government.
Yep.
Hey, blessings from Jamaica.
Bobby West. Hey.
He just got some distinction within the last week or two. That seemed like it was pretty cool. He got a jacket and a lot of praise for his work and stuff like that. So
legend on the back of it. It's really nice.
We'll have to have him on and talk about that and what's going on in Jamaica and all that kind of shit pretty soon.
It's 80 degrees in Jamaica. That's what's going on in Jamaica.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah.
Yeah, he already told me this morning. I mean, come on, Bobby. Go away.
He doesn't usually call, but he called this morning. Hey, I just want to let you know.
No, every morning he hits me up on my show. And it's like, come on, man.
It's been a long time since I've been in Jamaica. Adam, is that on what time zone is that? Is that Eastern or is that a little bit further?
It's our same time zone.
Same ones we have?
Yeah. He's close to it. I think the same.
It's south of us.
9 o'clock on our time is 9 o'clock JA time. So
yeah, I think Ryan's got the idea.
Let's all go see Bobby.
See Bobby. Yeah.
By the way, Ryan Bringold, his profile picture there features pictures of himself and also Boston George. One of the things I was asked to do on a program that I was featured on last week was to talk about some of the things that happened in 2021. I'm very proud of what we've done with Jazz Cabbage as an award winner and breaking news and talking about things like Leonard Peltier and Rainbow Farms. But we've also had to use this last year to eulogize some folks, including Eddie Lepp and Boston George and other folks too.
Marvin,
Professor Marvin Surowitz. Absolutely right. So it's 420 in Jamaica, says Sean Gallagher. Oh, love it.
I like that Zuki Lake Tavern thing he's got there. So I used to go there when the Lions home games were going on. That was the closest place that still showed it because there's like a 70-mile blackout radius when they didn't sell out, and they did not sell out a lot. So I used to go there and watch the games.
It was because people refused to just broadcast that team.
Well, remember when they were playing at the Silverdome had more seats than any other stadium in the National Football League. So it was super difficult to sell out the Silverdome. Right. And they tried to implement a rule where the Silverdome only had to sell out 80%, and the other NFL owners said,
nope. Right.
Sorry for your luck, but that's not the rule. So, and the Silverdome now is just a pile of rubble. It's just
not even a pile of rubble anymore. It's completely gone.
Yep. I've seen so many concerts at the Silver Dome. There were so many wonderful things. I've seen motocross at the Silver Dome. I've seen, demolition derbies at the Silver Dome. That was really a part of my history. And just like Tiger Stadium for a lot of people as well, although Tiger Stadium has a much longer history than the Pontiac Silver Dome did. When you see something that you connect with your youth go down like that, it is a time of sadness. I understand why people went down to pick up a brick from Tiger Stadium to take it home and to keep it in a revered place in their house. It's a memory. It's treasured.
Hey, so I want to, before we get a couple more guests are going to be coming on in a little bit, and they can talk about this too, but I just wanted to bring up the latest driving study, I believe out of Sydney. Is that right?
Yes. And it's actually it's an evaluation of a bunch of different scientific studies. It's not any new science. It's just a new look at old data.
It's taking data and then making some assessments, mainly that like using blood or saliva content is not a good indicator of impairment, and some things that we already know, but some more confirmation of that. Some of the highlights: THC-related biomarkers were associated with impairment in occasional cannabis users. So if you didn't use cannabis that much and you were high, it's possible that something showed up. But it says, however, most of these marker performance relationships were weak in strength. So you notice it, but it's not like causing a problem. THC-related biomarkers were not associated with impairment in regular cannabis users. That's most of us here. THC-related biomarkers are relatively poor indicators of cannabis-induced impairment.
That's all of us here.
And most of the people watching too, I would imagine, based on who's been giving comments. Those are some heavy users. So Matt Craven says he's going to roll up Gorilla Breath to smoke on while I listen. That sounds really cool, but I have to imagine in the real world, Gorilla Breath is probably horrible, right? Yeah.
Depending if you brushes your teeth.
I'm not sure gorillas know about soft bristled reach toothbrushes. I'm just going to say.
We're evolving all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So Anthony Holler asks, would like to hear what the favorite strains are currently in the top tier of highest quality. I don't know about top tier of highest quality, but I sure am in love with this. What did I have here the other day that I love so much, Jamie? From Detroit Diesel Company.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here it is. It is Sunday Driver. Wow.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's from the Halloween, the Daboween night. You got a bunch of that. I smoked through it pretty quickly.
I've got my Redemption Cannabis Little Dipper dab straw on the charger right now, and I will be using that later on during the show, so you can laugh at me when I cough, because I always cough when I do concentrates. But, it's awesome.
Matt Craven is saying keep them clean or don't be seen right.
Or don't be seen right.
Okay, so Chris Silva warned me when those things when we were talking about them at the gala the other night, that they do need to be maintained a little bit, but that they work really well. They're very cool. I've got one also. It's pretty cool. I got some papaya punch that came from Franklin Fields, and it's put out on the Scout branding, which is associated with the well flower, and it's really good.
My problem with concentrates always is when someone loads a rig for me, they almost always put too much in there. And if I can't clear the chamber, I want to smoke to the point where I'm comfortable. I don't want to look at a rig, see some smoke in there and think, well, I should probably just go in there and get the rest of it. That's when I trigger a negative bodily response, like a lot of coughing or even headaches. So with a dab straw, like what we got here from Redemption with the Little Dipper, that should allow me to be able to take just what I want and then to stop whenever I want, a little here, a little there. And the real thing that, to me, that's important is that there's no giant torch involved. I am a clumsy mofo. I do not trust me around flame objects. And anytime there's a torch, I like to let someone else operate the torch because I just know me. I'm going to drop it. So not having to have any open flame like that to heat up a tip is actually the right thing for me. So I'm excited. I did do the biggest dab you ever saw in Denver. I actually, back then I had a lot more lung power. That was 2015. It's been a hard 6 years since then. But I actually beat Ed Rosenthal. We did dabs, Ed Rosenthal and I took a bigger dab than Ed, and he actually gave me credit for the moment. But to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure Ed was dabbing all day. So no, it was. I enjoy cannabis in all its different forms.
I like it, what you're talking about. I like being able to kind of sip on it on the concentrates.
We have much better control. Yep. The problem is, the only problem is you can't get a cold start dab, where it starts out cold and heats up to a warm temperature. So you get a whole different terpene profile than when you drop something in hot or you come in with a hot tip. It's a whole, that's the one thing that the torch enables somebody with a banger to do. And that's a cold start dab.
The other thing is people that use torches are really good with it. They know exactly how to apply it to get the right glow from that.
Some do.
Some do. And how long to let it cool down before they take the hit so they're not burning off valuable terps. You know, when you really are into something like that, it doesn't matter what the tool is. When you're really into it and you're good at it, I just love to watch it. I've seen a couple of videos of guys making glass lately on Facebook Reels, and wow, I just love that. Michigan Glass Project. Kudos to you guys. And rest in peace, Steve Sharp, who was a big glass guy and used to love to watch he and Puff Danny blow glass down at his place.
Yeah. Steve Sharp's what we call the UK cheese cut. Sharp cheese.
Yeah.
I like the cheese stuff.
There it is.
With an E, sharp cheese. Got it right here.
Love it.
I miss Deb Young. Deb, come back. How come Deb's not on the show?
Last time I saw Deb was at the Rolling Stone concert when we were both walking.
Yeah.
That was great.
She was at John's fundraiser, John's 50th anniversary of the Freedom Rally.
A lot of pictures.
Yeah. I wanted to be there.
Yep, that was a fantastic.
Jim bought a ticket, but just didn't quite make it by.
Well,
you know, that was still in the throes of COVID towards the end of at least my first week of being cleared of it. And my memory was still a little shoddy, unfortunately.
Right on.
I got a little taste back, which is great.
Glad for that.
Me too.
Well, and what makes a wonderful event with John Sinclair, the intimacy. John sitting on a chair and you're literally just almost at arm's reach from him, listening to him recite poetry and tell stories. That's part of what's special about it, but it's also kind of what's dangerous about it too nowadays when you're that close, crammed together with people. And to be honest with you, some of the folks at John's event, a little sketchy. I'm just gonna say it, a little sketchy. So it was fun, and I'm certainly glad to be able to have done it. Shared that event with Susan and with a bunch of other wonderful people. Tammy Vandenberg came from the west side of the state. People came from John Schlicker from way up north. I mean, all over.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was kind of a small space. It never got overcrowded. Food was really good. The band was awesome.
Oh yes.
And the people sitting in were quite amazing. So I don't know if Barton is going to join us. Might be a technical issue possibly, but we'll see what happens. Paul should be coming in pretty soon, and also Josey. But I don't necessarily need to wait for Paul, though I do kind of want to hear what he has to say. But the motion for reconsideration was requested by the state, as we assumed, and the judge rendered a decision.
You did. You want to wait for Paul, or you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, just talk about it. We can still get Paul's take on it.
So here's the long and the short of it. We know that the MRA slapped Viridis with a recall for 3 months worth of cannabis from 2 of their locations. Viridis sued. The judge agreed to release one of the labs from that recall obligation, which essentially halved the recall. Unfortunately, some of the cannabis from that other lab has failed testing for microbials and aspergillus and biologicals. So it's technically at this point should not be able to be sold because it's known to be tainted. However, the judge's order didn't discriminate and say that you cannot return that for sale. It said you have to return all of the cannabis for sale, not just the cannabis that passes testing. So Viridis sued the Marijuana Regulatory Agency to make them return cannabis that they knew was tainted and bad to retailers in order to do this. If you break down the finances, it's about, maybe we estimate, up to $30 million worth of cannabis that could have tested bad at this point. 26% of all of the cannabis from Viridis North, according to the most recent court document from yesterday. So that's a pretty big incentive to get that stuff pushed back out to retailers. Now, there's no court order that requires a retailer to sell it, but there is a court order that requires the MRA to send it out. And they asked the judge to reconsider. The judge said, I did not err in the way that I made my decision. My decision had nothing to do with the current state of the cannabis and how it tests. So my order stands because there's no legal error on my part from when I made the decision. That kind of sucks. I can understand where legally he might be walking that line, saying this is my obligation. I can't overturn it just because I realize something's wrong. But from a health and human perspective, it's pretty atrocious. Now, recognize a couple things. All of the cannabis that we're talking about, the 26% of the cannabis tested by Viridis North that's now positive for all of these microbials, there's no guarantee that Viridis did anything wrong with that. The fact is they could have been just fine when it left Viridis' lab, but after being handled and shipped and back and forth, it's now tainted. So regardless of who's at fault, from a consumer perspective, just don't sell it. I see we've been joined by Barton Morris, but Adam, you want to get in real quick before?
Yeah, what I see is an even bigger problem is that the MRA offered a workaround to the metric system that has a hard stop in it for failed product. So the system that we all hate actually has a fail stop measure that if a product fails testing, it won't allow it to be sold in the system.
Can't the judge say, I'm not stopping that, but the regular rules and processes that are in place might snare it up because it has a positive.
But the MRA then sent out, it's my understanding, sent out letters to these dispensaries telling them how to work around that so they can then sell that product that the system should have stopped from selling.
That's the court order. The court order required them to do that. The court order said you have to transfer this back to the retailers, and so they had to come up with a novel way to do it, exactly for the reason you're talking about.
That seems extreme and unnecessary, even though he followed all the procedures and the facts and all that kind of stuff when it becomes a health concern.
It should have been returned to the dispensaries for them to destroy.
Yeah, and maybe
they should not be allowed to sell it if it fails testing. That's the purpose of that.
Yeah,
we're gonna continue to talk about this, and in fact, Attorney Barton Morris, I know you're probably aware of all this stuff going on with Viridis and things like that, and with a motion for reconsideration was denied, and as we discussed, the judge has no problem saying, well, just based on these circumstances, that stuff has to go back to the market. I can't do anything about that. That seems a little bit.
Recall never happened, right?
Yeah.
Did you ask my opinion?
Yeah, I just wanted your thoughts on that before we move on a little bit. I know that we have some other stuff to talk about, but
yeah, well, I mean, my thoughts are that the judge ruled, in my opinion, that some of that product wasn't fairly recalled, and he denied all motions by the MRA and granted basically the motions from the labs, and I found him to be legitimate.
Yeah, legitimate process. I mean, I think we all kind of, at least as far as where the judge describes how he arrived at this and why and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then there are, tests, whether it got contaminated after leaving Viridis or whatever happened. But then there are tests of product that doesn't pass the microbial standards, and it's mandated to go back to the shelves. It just seems weird. Like there should be, the other rules and processes that are in place then come into play when it comes to that stuff. But that doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's representation of the MRAs. This was such a huge thing for them, and they're trying to go against this lab. Yet what you're talking about is the fact that they failed some tests and they have to be quarantined, or they have to be kept from being sold. That's not what the judge ruled. That wasn't the issue that was before him. I think that was an issue with the MRA and their inability to be able to properly protect the public and to be able to proceed in a manner that is within their within the rules, which I think were not even clear in the first place.
Well, but Barton, the fact is that we're aware now that a significant amount of that cannabis has failed testing, and cannabis that failed testing is now being forced by court order back to the retailers for potential sale. So regardless of whether or not the judge used sound reasoning to make his initial decision, at this point, there needs to be an intercedence in order to stop this bad cannabis from being actually resold by retailers. However, the MRA under court order crafted a methodology by which it can be sold to people, even though it's failed testing.
Yeah, and I'm saying that the court has nothing to do with that. That's an issue that the MRA is supposed to again try and stop happening. That wasn't an issue before the court, in my understanding, and so
Right.
the MRA is responsible for doing that. And I think that they already got in over their heads in the manner in which that they tried to administer this whole situation, and I think that's the reason why that happened.
But, you know, you can say that the court's not involved in this, but it was the court order itself that's forcing this back into the retailers. So, I mean, isn't it
I get that, right? But it's because of the arguments that were made to the court, right? Those arguments that you're talking about weren't made to the court. The arguments that were made by Viridis was, you know, that we've got 2 labs and one of them had nothing to do with it, and this is really a penalty on Viridis, and now you're holding up all of this product without due process, and the court agreed and ordered or created that the manner in which that they enforced that decision. I think the MRA now has the responsibility to come back and continue to take action within their rules in order to protect the public from getting any bad.
But they might not be able to, though.
Well, this is where the metric system should take over and prevent that 26% of the product that was retested from ever seeing the shelves.
I think we have to rely on the retailers to not put it back on the shelves. I think the MRA doesn't want it back on the shelves, but the judge has mandated it.
And you have to go through an extraordinary process in order to sell it. You have to create a separate record outside of the metric computer system, which then has to be turned into the MRA. So It's not as if any bud tender or any retailer would unknowingly sow it. In order to do that, they have to go through crazy steps. So
if they choose to do that,
but
remember, these people are under subjective observation. It's only when somebody wants to turn on the camera do they actually get monitored. So
I doubt that the MRA will release a list of retailers who actually have this product and could potentially.
I wish they would.
I wish they would too, but I doubt they will.
I want to smoke some of that failed product.
We're gonna circle back around to this. Kind of went on a little bit longer than I want. We're gonna invite Josey to the discussion, but then get back to Barton and discuss Rudi Gammo. And he's a prisoner right now. He's in there for cannabis reasons. He had a store in Detroit, although as part of the whole investigation and everything, it ended up in the courts in Oakland County, and he ended up getting sentenced to jail for a long time. And just to be brief about it, it seems to be excessive, and those arguments being made. And Barton's been doing a really good job, along with others, of getting a lot of notice and getting him involved in the various processes that could eventually, do something about this. And so he's still in there, but we do have some kind of decent news to report, don't we, Barton?
We do. A commutation. This is our second commutation application. The first one we did shortly after he went in, so perhaps in 2018 or 19. Which was summarily denied, right? Because in Michigan, commutation applications are handled and processed by the Michigan Department of Corrections. They're not like delivered to the governor for the governor's consideration. In Michigan, statutorily, the Michigan Department of Corrections has the obligation or responsibility to determine whether the application has merit. So the first time we sent it in, it was denied, no hearing, no anything. Then we had to wait an entire year because you can't file again for another year. And we did that. We filed the second time in 2019, I think the end of 2019 or maybe early 2020, which is, quite some time ago. And finally, there's been movement. It was about maybe about 4 months ago, the Michigan Department of Corrections had an informal hearing, which was a lot further than we got the first time. And now we're having a formal hearing scheduled on January 18th. The Michigan Department of Corrections has determined, in my understanding, that this does have merit. That is the reason why we have this hearing. We've been granted this hearing, and we think that's a really favorable result. I mean, we're very excited about how far this has gone. And, remember, this is after we filed the motion in front of the sentencing judge, or actually that sentencing judge predecessor, because she retired. And the prosecutor, who was newly elected, Karen McDonald, was in favor of that motion to immediately release Rudi Gammo from jail. Remember, Rudi Gammo was in prison because he was he was growing as a caregiver and sponsoring other caregivers to sell medical marijuana, legal medical marijuana, at his municipally licensed medical marijuana dispensary in the city of Detroit. And Oakland County, Wayne County wouldn't prosecute it. The DEA wouldn't prosecute it. The federal government, the Department of Justice wouldn't prosecute that. But Oakland County did. And even though the county prosecutor wanted to get him out, the judge said no. And so now we have the opportunity to get the governor to grant this commutation application. And again, it's gotten farther along than the last one, of course, but far enough along, we believe it's going to be successful, and it's really exciting.
Barton, really, we talk about Rudi's case. He's in jail for doing stuff that other people are doing right now and making millions of dollars from, right?
Yeah. Listen, not quite, right? Because the people that are doing it now, they went through the full licensing process. Rudi didn't even have that opportunity. There wasn't a full licensing process at that time. He did everything he could do at the time. He got a certificate of occupancy from the municipality. He had caregivers that were registered through the medical marijuana program that had legitimate patients. He was never accused of selling medical marijuana to anybody other than a medical marijuana patient. He was completely within the ordinance from the city of Detroit. So he was, again, doing everything that he possibly could. He couldn't even get a license for this business at that time. And after he went into jail, we did get that business a license. They have been operating fully licensed. And so, yes, since he's been in jail, we did get a full commercial license. We did do all of the things necessary in order for that business to operate completely legally. Of course, not able to do so recreationally because of the city doesn't permit that yet. But yeah, Rick, that's tragic. The fact that he's in jail for a completely nonviolent, municipally permitted offense, and all those that are like him, because it wasn't just Rudi. I represented I don't know how many people before Michigan legalized marijuana, legalized recreational marijuana, for just simply growing marijuana. Growing marijuana was a felony in this state a couple of years ago, where people went to jail for it. People got felony convictions on their record. It still blows me away at this point. Like that happened not even that long ago. So it's not just Rudi that was affronted by Michigan and the federal government's prohibition of marijuana and criminalization of marijuana, but he's just one of the people that worst received its penalties.
When you talk about Oakland County overstepping their bounds and going into Wayne County to make an arrest, they certainly did that in Lapeer County too, when they went after, our Compassion Center out there too. They went into Macomb County and did raids. The Four Bears dispensary on the very same day that they raided Everybody's Cafe. They went out to Macomb County and got that too, and they've done other raids inside Wayne County. So, I mean, Oakland County has really put forth the example of an overreaching governmental agency that's so focused on cannabis that they're really ignoring more serious crime in the community. I know you're a resident of Oakland County. Doesn't that kind of make you mad, Barton?
It did.
Is Karen McDonald coming through, do you think? What's the feedback after her being in there for a little while now?
Well, I have nothing but positive things to say. Of course, there's been some people that have some negative things to say regarding the Oxford incidents, but I think that she's been doing a phenomenal job. I couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, that's precisely what, I'm not talking about Oxford, but as far as her stance on marijuana, I just talked to her recently. They don't take marijuana cases, period. There's no their policy, no marijuana cases. It's exactly what she promised to do. It's exactly what, when she called me, when she, told me she was running, she told me that's what exactly she was going to do. And she's come through. I mean, the fact is we've decriminalized. We're so fortunate, by the way, Michigan's decriminalized marijuana because there's so many other states that have it. And when I travel sometimes and I go to these other states and I was in North Carolina recently and I was reminded very quickly that I could just be in simple possession of marijuana and go to jail. I mean, you forget about that. You know what I mean? Like we forget we're in Michigan now. We're just like, we're behind. That's behind us. It's so not behind so many other millions of Americans, and that still we have to do something about that too.
Earlier in the broadcast we mentioned the 50th anniversary of the John Sinclair Freedom Rally, and John Sinclair on his chair in front of everybody said, in the old days I would have 2 life sentences for the amount of cannabis that I have on me right now. He wasn't wrong. He's not wrong. I mean, we talk about having to stair step our way to success, and you can certainly see that there's an evolution there. But you're right. I mean, Michigan is almost an island of sensibility, no matter how much we like to change our system.
But even the point is, even Oakland County, once the law changed, still played dirty pool by not allowing people to use the term medical marijuana at trial and things like that. I mean, just simple, motion. They'd file simple motions that would send a winning case into the garbage.
They'd played dirty pool it was really one person, one prosecutor assistant prosecutor, the head of the drug unit that really made that happen. And I've been a defense attorney for 20 years. Pretty sure she is the absolute worst that myself and everybody else I know ever had to deal with. And that was a representation of Oakland County and the Oakland County prosecutor at that time. As soon as she was gone, as soon as Karen came in, the first thing she did was got rid of Beth Hand.
She was an evil bitch. I'll say it right here. I dealt with her.
Her last name is Hand, but when you see her in the court, you think of a different body part.
Wow. So here's the reality, though, is that the Oakland County prosecutor's office pushed a lot of cases to the Court of Appeals, and they received some really damaging decisions from the Court of Appeals that affected cannabis users throughout the entire state. For our viewers that might not be familiar with it, a Court of Appeals decision is binding until there's a Supreme Court decision that overturns it. So when the Court of Appeals decides that, you have to treat cannabis like plutonium in the way that you travel around in your car, or that, the smell of cannabis is still justification for a search of your automobile, or that, an automobile is a public place, even though it's your private area. When those things get decided, everybody suffers. And they really did push those cases. Jamie, what were we? We lost like 17 in a row in the Court of Appeals at the beginning of the cannabis era? I
was going to say like 17 or 19 or something like that.
Court of Appeals is tough for us. What I'm talking about.
Oakland County was a support. They're the ones that supported that. They're the ones that put those before the Court of Appeals and many in the Supreme Court. Oakland County was that conservative county that really was responsible for a lot of bad law. And again, things change and things are better now. And it's just time to still fight for those wrongs that were committed, including people like Rudi Gammo.
And Judith Pontius, too. We're looking at, again, another another horrible local ordinance, Barton, in Dexter, Michigan, which is in Washtenaw County, which would require 5 acres in order to be able to have a cultivation center inside your home, and all kinds of restrictions on caregivers. We've just seen a real retraction of cannabis privileges on a municipal level, which is an attack that we really didn't have to worry about for a while.
I guess I saw it coming, because we all know that people would complain about their neighbors growing marijuana. And when that happens, the police get involved. And then when the police are no longer effective, the municipalities begin to respond. And then that's when things started getting bad, because municipalities really just not really having any sympathy or any desire to have some compassion for caregivers, or even look out for their rights. They just began to pass ordinances that are eliminating them, suppressing them, regulating them to the degree to which that they're becoming extinct. And unfortunately, they're getting away with it right now. They're getting away with really, really restrictive and just unfair ordinances. And it's going to take some more time before the Court of Appeals again and the Supreme Court begin to provide more analysis and understanding of how they're to be evaluated, these ordinances. And it's really unfair. It's just happening over. I didn't know about Dexter, but I'm not surprised. I've seen some that are so ridiculous that it's just like that you're just taking advantage of the situation. And that's the history of medical marijuana in Michigan. Michigan had medical marijuana. We were like the 12th or 13th state in the country to have medical marijuana back in 2008. And so we're like unlike most other states, we had 8 years of the development of medical marijuana law before we had recreational marijuana. And so that's a lot of why we're in the situation we're in now, because that 8 years really created a lot of different things that we're talking about.
The DeRuyter decision, which is another one of those court cases that has an effect statewide. For many, many years, municipalities felt like they could not regulate caregiving activity because that was kind of the court's decision at that point, that the MMMA superseded things like the Michigan Townships Association or any of the local compacts or ordinance law. But then the DeRuyter decision came out, and that turned that on its head, saying that municipalities could regulate caregivers, but it wasn't very specific in how they could regulate caregivers, right, Barton?
That's right. And that's why municipalities are running amok right now, utilizing that decision.
But
there'll
be a lot of subsequent lawsuits, though, because of that.
I would hope so.
Sure, of course. And I do believe there will be continued Court of Appeals or appellate opinions that will further define how it's supposed to be interpreted, because municipalities that are creating ordinances that effectively ban and eliminate caregivers, they, in my opinion, are superseded by the Medical Marijuana Act, because that's what they're intending to do and what they're practically doing. And so I believe that there is a very strong argument that will be made to these appellate courts, where they will have the opportunity to further define exactly what it means to be preempted by the Medical Marijuana Act. And many of these ordinances, I think, we're going to fail. But unfortunately, they're in effect now, and they will continue to be in effect until we continue to redevelop and better define what it means to be preempted by the Medical Marijuana Act.
And for our viewers that aren't familiar, the Medical Marijuana Act was a voter-directed initiative, which means that it is superior to legislatively enacted laws when it comes to conflicts between the two. So when, for example, your local ordinance says you can tell people they can't be caregivers, but the state law says they have a right to be caregivers if they're registered with the state, our law is victorious and has been for years and years and years until the DeRuyter decision. And really, there's the ambiguity. What's the likelihood that you're going to see some caregivers taking their municipality to court over the definitions of how they can regulate activity locally, Barton? I mean, it seems like that would be the next step in this whole combat, right?
It is. And And it is something that we're planning on doing, and I would imagine others are as well. The township of Ypsilanti, for instance, they have an ordinance that they're interpreting is right on point with DeRuyter, but in my opinion, it's not at all. Right? In fact, it's the opposite, and it illustrates what I had mentioned earlier. What it's really doing is practically getting rid of caregivers, and that is not what was intended by the Medical Marijuana Act. In fact, that's completely opposite of what the Medical Marijuana Act is, what it stands for, and that's something that has to be litigated first in trial court, and then, of course, at the appellate courts before it becomes law for the whole state.
Remember that for a long time, municipalities tried to stop people from growing in their homes or stop caregivers from being in their communities by using exclusionary zoning things, saying that in order to be able to do this, you had to have a space in this particular zone, in this light industrial or only in agricultural. And those were shot down by the courts, in 11.
But now they're back.
Yeah.
And now, because of one bad court decision, years and years of precedent just seem to be turned on their head. It's kind of confusing from a layman's perspective, Barton. It really is.
And it's scary too, right? I mean, I don't know how many caregivers that I'm speaking to now that are legitimate caregivers that are fearful. They fear that if they expand their operations or perhaps go from 4 patients to 6 patients, that we're going to get a crackdown, and that even though what they're doing is completely contemplated and legal within the Act, Medical Marijuana Act, they're fearing what the municipality is going to do and the legal expenses that will accompany any type of enforcement action, and it is really having a detrimental effect. And then, of course, with the what's it called, the marijuana safety reform bills,
The anti-caregiver bills.
Yeah.
Right. Those are having, even though they're, in my opinion, not even anywhere close to a vote or even close to a successful vote, they're still having a significant impact because people, they put that date in there, March 31st, I think, or May 31st, 2022. People actually think that that's like a legitimate date. People say, well, I know that I have to get rid of my plants by March 31st. And of course, I explained, no, that's not true at all. It's just a proposed date. That's not law. It's not anywhere near being law. Yet it's still having a detrimental effect. It's got on people's decision making when it comes to what they're going to do with their caregiving grows.
Barton, contained within those bills is an attack on Section 8.2. Please go ahead, Adam. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, one of the problems is with these ordinances is that in order to get to the point that we need, that we need to get to through the courts, it's going to cause drama in somebody's life. These ordinances, most likely what's going to happen is someone's going to run afoul of an ordinance, at which point they'll be noticed by the city, either as Judith was with the police showing up at her door, or if they're lucky, they'll get a cease and desist letter, at which point they'll have to then contact people like Barton, who then will start the process and get the court, get the ball rolling in the court system. So it's a whole process that we're going to have to go through to make change, unfortunately.
But somebody has to be an aggrieved party before we can file on these, right, Barton? You can't just say, I'm a citizen and I perceive this is going to damage me, so I want to stop it before that happens. You actually have to get kicked in the nuts before you can actually sue, right?
Well, no, you can ask for a injunctive relief. If I'm a caregiver and I'm in a municipality that is basically saying I have to do this or that, and I believe that that's an unlawful act, and if I believe that that's something that can be challenged in court, then I can. The standing comes with me being a caregiver, as long as you're.
But you have to have standing in that community.
So, but it is true that like Verbeek was like that. That was kind of somewhat preemptive or whatever. But it's also true that some cases have been dismissed because the judges said that nobody's been damaged yet, and there's no standing, and just didn't allow that. That has happened too.
Perhaps, but injunctive relief is a remedy. It's a method. So it is something that is legitimate, because then I tell my clients that either we can attack it now or we can wait and see if you get a ticket, and then we can defend the ordinance violation.
Hey,
So,
I
Go
just need to jump in. I gotta bail, guys. I appreciate hanging out with you. I gotta take off. I realize what time it is.
I do too. I've got
Dinner
another
occasion.
appointment, but thank you guys very much for having me. It's good to see all of you.
Barton and Adam are bailing on us.
yeah, no, Barton, thanks for your work.
Thank you very much, man.
With Rudi Gammo, and for the update on that. It's good news. July 18th or January 18th.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, man. Okay.
Wow, great.
So, all right, I think I didn't want to, keep on talking in circles about that the Viridis situation. I think Barton was right, but I just kind of think that we never really got to the point of now what do you do with the fact that some of the stuff's tainted?
Yeah, well, and you can put it on the MRA, but I believe the MRA is correct when they feel that the court ordered them to be able to craft a methodology to return the merchandise back to where it came from. That is what the court said. They even asked him, "Are you sure this is what you want us to do?" And the judge just said, "Yeah, I'm really sure I want you to do that." So they're doubly validated in my mind as far as crafting that way to send it back to the retailers. I think what we really need to do is hold on to the concept that retailers are not required to sell this cannabis, and they should do the integrity thing. But there's no guarantee, right? And you don't know when you pick up a jar or you pick up a pre-roll and it says tested by Viridis, unless you specifically know the dates involved and you can identify Viridis North as opposed to just the regular Viridis. You don't know. So I would just stay away from it.
It sounds like, the conflict that this is starting too for grows and dispensaries alike with that relationship, because these flowers were tested and they came back, in some cases not passing. And now these flowers are being sent back. It's just really, it just causes one big clusterfuck in this whole industry that just ripples, and it all has to do with people making decisions that have no knowledge or wherewithal to reach out for someone who has the knowledge to make a decision.
Well, Claire Patterson was just cited again in one of the articles recently that talked about this, either the MLive articles or the Detroit Free Press article.
She's a scientist within the MRA.
She sure is. And she said, we noticed a pattern where cannabis was listed as failing a test for microbials at one lab, and then the very next day it was given a passing rating by the Viridis lab
Without remediation.
The next day.
Yeah, the very next day. I mean, how stupid can you get? Plus, realize that in order to do a plate test, you're supposed to let it cook for a certain number of hours. So it seems highly unlikely that you'd have that kind of thing going on.
And they went to go check it out, and they said, okay, what kind of temperatures were these? What was the incubation? Blah, blah, blah. Where are the records on that? Oh, we didn't know we had to keep them.
And they were like,
Just checked it out. So this is like somebody with scientific background and knowledge in a lab.
Yeah. So now, you would think that, those records are now being kept and the processes are at the proper. I mean, I'm not saying that they weren't before, but now you can see that they were being.
You have to verify science
at the proper temperatures and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to turn those same things around? Their process now is going to pass these, whereas the others didn't. I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity to make those comparisons now, but
they're approved to test right now. They have no restrictions or fetters on their ability to test at this moment.
Yeah. No, but they are keeping records now and shit though.
They are keeping records now.
So if they were fucking around, some people theorize that they were utilizing different temperatures in order to make those things pass. And one of the reasons why they weren't being kept by record is so that there wouldn't be record of that. That's not necessarily the case, but that's what some people discuss.
Yep. So Sunshine Daisy, of course, tells us traditional plating methods are 3 to 4 days, and qPCR is 24 hours. I believe the qPCR methodology was disallowed by the Cannabis Marijuana Regulatory Agency earlier this year because they felt it wasn't yielding proper results. qPCR isn't about looking at a sample and finding mold on it. It's about analyzing DNA. They homogenize the sample, and then they look for certain DNA traces to determine whether or not bad stuff has been growing on that particular sample. So 2 different methodologies. One's very established and one's relatively new.
Hey, so Josey is here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just start off, Josey, and let you kind of just fill in some gaps. The charities that you have started, have driven, have been working with for a while now, have seen a pretty good year, and you're able to help out a lot of people this year.
Yeah, we saw a really big year this year. We also teamed up with the Redemption Foundation to launch the Great Lakes Expungement Network, which has over 300 clients here in the state of Michigan at Sons and Daughters. Every year we're shooting to do better than the last, and this was our best year ever. We are constantly evolving, and I'm looking forward to reaching more areas and reaching more places. But 2021 was a good year for us collectively. I think there was a lot more shops that have put a lot more effort into their social equity plans, which has been beneficial.
So social equity plans, of course, are optional for anybody outside of the adult use program, but you still see a ton of people trying to give, whether they're within the plant touching industries or outside of it, like covert law, like some of the other ancillary industries, right?
Being joined by attorney Paul Tylenda, who's finally appropriately addressed. For
Damn, he looks good. Dude.
Did you guys see Paul's shirt at the telethon? Did you see it? It's got Michigan on it, and I texted him. I was like, "I love your Gander shirt." He said it has bongs and stuff on it too. Amazing.
It's a high level health shirt.
Oh, really?
Good stuff. Rick, I got to compliment you for saying plant toucher. I love that term.
Yep. Plant touching industries, right?
You're a plant toucher.
I like it. Let's.
Hi,
okay, I'm going to keep it
Josey.
clean.
Hi, Jim.
And we're going to come back around to some of the stuff we were talking about before with Viridis and stuff. Hopefully, Paul, this time. But we're focusing on the stuff that you're also involved with, which is a lot of the stuff with the Great Lakes Expungement Network and Sons and Daughters, and just how generous the industry has been and all the great work that we're now able to do.
I really got to give it up for Sons and Daughters. What a genius, absolutely genius idea, right? It is serving essentially the forgotten. And that's for me, that's the most beautiful part about it, is that the people that need the day-to-day help, the people that need the connection, the communication, the families, the kids, they're the ones that lose the most. And to address that need, I mean, for me, that's, it's mind-blowing and sad that it didn't exist until now. And I mean, I feel better about the world knowing that it does.
Yeah, we've talked about this a decent amount during the show, buddy. You weren't on earlier, but we've addressed it a couple times.
Yeah, Buddy's asking about Dexter. We just had a big conversation about that with Barton Morris, who represented Judith Pontius in the case about things. So, Buddy, you might want to rewind a little bit and take a look at what we talked about over the
last people can get out there tonight and help out if they want. They can get their 3 minutes and give them your input.
Absolutely. And of course, local communities always give preference to those folks that live there. But if you're an expert on the subject and you can speak well and you have something to say, and even if you don't, get a chance to make it down there to Dexter, do that. Those people would appreciate having a help. We've struggled a lot with local communities trying to stop us from doing what we want to do. Josey, we were talking about how well Sons and Daughters has performed this year. Talk about how many families you are you're able to help this year, and how many gifts you were able to provide.
Yeah, so the holiday drive runs parallel with our already existing grants. The Renee Wolf Memorial Grant, which provides services to people with disabilities, anything from medical equipment to doctor's appointments, things that you're really struggling to get covered by insurance. And then also our Family Connection Grant, which helps people stay connected to their loved ones who are incarcerated. So 1 in 12 children across the course of the year will have an incarcerated parent. Talking to those parents is expensive and extremely difficult, especially now during COVID. So when you sign up for the program, you also enroll in one of these grants. And so we get you, we got a hospital bed for a girl with Parkinson's. And then also for our clients who have loved ones who are incarcerated, they're already enrolled in the Family Connection Grant so that they get monthly payments to help them stay connected to their loved ones while they're incarcerated. Now that money does go to the people on the outside. And so that means sometimes we have clients who brothers and sisters are also using the program, which I think is really, really a nice way to keep it all connected. This year we were able to help out 17 families. We added a family quickly at the end. Shout out to our friends at Dudes Abide, Constantine and Coldwater. It was, we had a family apply that didn't have any coats or jackets or the bare necessities, and it was several weeks after the closure of the grant, but the story and the need was there. Crystal, who is phenomenal at Sons and Daughters, she called, and the first place she called was the most local place she knew, which is what I suggest all my friends to do. And they picked it up. They spent several $1,000s on new clothing and winter gear and things that, children need. And they did it with just a couple days notice. But we do see, this is our favorite time of the year, so this is where we see all of our favorite cannabis corporations kind of pitching in. We did a really great match and still are doing a match at BOCO. So if you're in or around Lansing or Kalkaska or Tawas, stop in and make a donation to Sons and Daughters. They are matching it. We provided more gifts. We raised more money. We helped more children than we ever did before. So I'm so appreciative. I'm so thankful. Thank you guys so much.
Josey, what's a hospital bed run? I know they're really expensive.
So I was just about ready to jump in because this is the third year I think Botanical Company has been involved, and you wrote back I think after the last contribution saying it was going to be earmarked toward getting this bed.
Right. So 100% hospital beds are not cheap. I am and it's more than just a hospital bed. So the issue is getting she wanted a queen bed. She needs more space. It's harder to get out. You'll never find a charity or insurance to give you a queen adjustable bed. But also as adults, don't we all want to sleep in queen beds? Like, don't we want to, if we have a partner or whatever, do we really want to sleep in our own bed? A twin size bed as adults, I don't know. But just being able to purchase the bed for not only Gabby, but we also had another family where they were reemerging. The mom was reemerging from incarceration. They just moved. Nobody had beds. So we bought beds for the kids. And so I think that there's so many, when we look at policies that are created to help people and policies that people that are disenfranchised usually rely on people like people with disabilities or people who are incarcerated. There's not a lot to make up for the people that fall through the cracks. So I'm so excited to team up with all of our friends. And that's really what it is, right? We see the same people every year, like Jamie says. They like doing it. They get really excited about it. Also, did you guys see Penny at Northern Specialty Health? She went out on her own accord and spent over $1,000 on necessities and toys for kids in her community. And I was like, Penny, let me help you get a tax deduction. She's like, we do this all the time.
That's another one. We were kind of going over a lot of this activity around the state and a lot of great response. And
and this is something that a lot of places do their own spin on. And I'm always excited holiday season to see what they're doing at all my favorite shops. Like Lake Effect always does some cool promotion. I know that during Thanksgiving, usually if you go into Herbology, you can get free pre-rolls for bringing 5 canned goods, whatever. So holiday season is a good time to give back, but it's also a good time for you as a cannabis company to connect with your customers
When
and
Jim
give
was
them venues.
when Jim was manager at home, they were big on the coat drives every year and also donating tons and tons of food to the harvest
100,000 pounds, I think, a year with food gatherers.
food
How
gatherers.
did you do it? What did you offer for like incentive?
You know, we
Do you
didn't.
even have to?
It would be pre-rolls, it would be samples or edible or something. But people, exactly, Josie, we didn't have to. I mean, the cannabis community is known to be very philanthropic and giving, and it's great to see that when you don't offer or people don't even ask, and you're like, well, let me just give you something anyway. Jeez.
Well, that goes back to the basic principle of, most retail cannabis companies follow the good neighbor policy, and they know that spotlight's on them in the neighborhood, and that they're the ones that if something goes wrong, that they might take it twice as hard, but they're the ones that usually show up 3 times as large and are typically the biggest asset to the community.
So what we found was, you can call a place like Food Gatherers and find that giving them cans is definitely an awesome thing to do. People should do that. But giving them money, they can do so much more with. And when we opened up a drive for that, then that would equate to over 100,000 pounds of food on a yearly basis.
Yeah, when you're talking about a charity, they can manipulate pricing based on purchases or based on what kind of a deduction or the good nature of the wholesaler that they happen to be getting it from. So $1 that we would spend in retail might actually translate into $3 worth of food if it was handled by the charity itself. I was always proud at Art Van Furniture to work with the Friars down there, Capuchin Kitchen. Whenever we had furniture at Art Van Furniture that we knew that we were probably not likely to move, we would always donate, and they were always grateful to have it. There was never a time when they turned away something that we had for them. So it's interesting when you see the connection between commercial and charitable giving. Here in Flint, I'm very fortunate. I grew up in a city where we have the Mott family. Mott's applesauce. Well, Mott sponsors everything up here. I played Mott League football. Mott bought our shoulder pads. I mean, exactly. There's just so much goodness that they're able to bring to the community. Their name is just naturally associated with charity. And as the cannabis industry emerges, I'm pretty sure some of our brothers and sisters that do well are going to show up proud.
Could you imagine if their last name was Pot instead of Mott?
I would have loved that.
All this. Jeez.
Pot league football. Yeah.
That gets into the idea that we don't see enough of, and it has fallen off, certainly in the last half a decade, but, corporate philanthropy, or the ideas of parks and just large municipal gifts from the corporations, not necessarily as a trade or as a sign off on something, but really as a way to, make neighborhood improvements, or just to give back, to be a good neighbor and take care of those around them. I mean, that's, if the cannabis industry could, essentially become, the next string of Rockefellers, where you would have large scale projects that were, done at the cost of the cannabis industry for the benefit of the public. Again, these are ideas and gestures that make it really hard for someone to say something bad about the industry after they do something so grand.
Jerry Millen at Greenhouse is helping to restore a home that was part of the Underground Railroad during Civil War times. You're seeing acts like that all over the place. I know Joe's has a lot of friends out on the west side of the state that are doing some pretty amazing things in their communities too. Even in the old days, when there was no real incentive to do it, we'd see Steve and Bobby on Van Dyke Avenue, just south of 7 Mile, and they would be just, cleaning up lots and restoring buildings and just doing great things for the community.
Yeah, I want to add on, since we're talking about those things up in Kalkaska area, in conjunction with the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. There are many groups and organizations, but a couple of the bigger ones, Botanical Company and Real Leaf Solutions, are helping to get a park established in an area where there was just a rundown house.
A handicap accessible.
And it's handicap accessible, particularly, yeah.
Where do I put my trip to Kalkushka? What is it?
Calcush got the social lounge,
Yeah.
with the John Sinclair Cafe.
Yeah, I really like what Paul was saying, just about that, communities and building on communities. And I think once the cannabis industry, we get the plant decriminalized and we get it off, the Substance Control Act, then we don't have to worry so much about getting people out of prison and fighting these other things. So we can start doing things like that, and focus our time on building and improving.
One of the things that bothers me is when I see cannabis companies in Michigan taking out $100 million loans from Canadian financiers. In my mind, what that means is $100 million worth of Michigan bucks is going to turn around and go out of state to pay for something else over there. If it was going to Dart Bank, if it was going to First Federal, if it was going to some in-state financial institution, there's a chance that some of that money would be used philanthropically to enhance these things. But if it's going to Ottawa, Ottawa wins, and in my mind, we lose. So when I see SkyMint with borrowing another $70 million so they can expand another purchase situation that they're at, that's just another
just all of their stores and their businesses they're just do so well, and they make so much money, and they're just using it to reinvest and just buy more properties, I think, right?
I think if ever there was a company that was trying to posture themselves for a huge takeover, that's what it looks like. They're making purchases of other brand names in order to try and make themselves more attractive to an MSO. A multi-state operator wants to come in, and they don't want to just buy one location and then build from that. They want to come in and buy somebody who's got 30 freaking locations, right?
And some of the discussion about some of the MCMA anti-caregiver efforts, and whether or not it's true, I don't know, but there is the discussion out there that some people view the caregiver system in Michigan as an issue, as serious competition to this stuff. And these guys can't sell out their big operations, to these other larger organizations until they can do something about what they call the caregiver problem. Mm-hmm. So whether that's true or not, that is being discussed. Have you heard that, Paul?
I think that's always like the back talk or the underpinnings of a lot of conversations. And in my mind, if you have somebody who's a big company who's afraid of the caregiver market, to me, it says two things. One is they don't understand the caregiver market and how it works, or really who that market serves. The other side of it is maybe they know too much about that market because they're participating in it because they need a traditional outlet. Either way, to be internally divisive, right? To make to make another portion of the cannabis industry mad at you, or to drive a wedge and to point the finger at them, is not smart politics, whatever you're trying to accomplish.
But Paul, think about this though. What you're doing is you're trying to posture because you have out-of-state stakeholders that want to see you take some kind of action in order to improve this bottom line that you're telling them that you're limited on. It can't get any better because of these damn illicit market in Michigan. If your shareholders are insisting that they see some kind of action on you to try and rectify that, that's also a third motive in order to drive people to do things that are illogical, because the people they owe money to are pushing them to do it, even though they know. Let's not forget, there was a time when all the king's horses and all the king's men still couldn't put down the illegal cannabis trade. People, there's no amount of pressure you can apply in 2021 that's going to be greater than the pressure that you applied previously, and all you ever did was make it cheaper and more available.
Well, and that absolutely, and that goes to the point of, I always think of guys like Mr. Hashbash. Where's our friend Adam today, right? But that closing down or closing down the caregiver market is not going to mean that you are going to drive people into the retail market. Right. That's a fallacy. That just doesn't, if you were to shut them all down, which you're not going to, and you're not going to then, take away my caregiver rights, do you think that changed the way my basement looks? Yeah. So you're not going to affect the market necessarily. I just don't think it's in terms of the smart battle, right? In terms of if you've got a handful of guns to use and a handful of soldiers and you got to point your guns at somebody, that ain't it. The other participants in cannabis are not the ones, because again, it's not that really the illicit market in its unknown quantity and quality is affecting a regulated market. No, you want to make things easier on the regulated side, just make things easier on the regulated side. Talk to all the participants and find out what the hurdles are. And again, like with California is saying that we're going to eliminate the tax, and that's supposed to, let's say, alleviate the problem of competition with the traditional market. It's a step in the right direction, but it may only be really because that's the only tool they have. So in the regulated market here in Michigan, what can the regulated market do other than affect the tax rate or
they can accept the fact that it's going to be a slow migration from the old ways to the new ways. And no matter how many millions of dollars they owe to Canadian financiers, they cannot make people come into an acceptance state for the regulated market any faster than people are going to come into it.
Hey guys,
well, and the thing, if you want competition, how about you do $25 ounces? How about that? You want to beat the market at its game?
Yeah.
Tank them.
You know,
do
earlier
what tobacco did.
Earlier in the show, Paul, we talked about, you know, some of the stuff that's going on in California. Obviously, a lot of differences, but some similarities, you know, emerging. And some of the discussion is reduce a lot of the restrictions and regulations and allow more operations and less taxes and, you know, that type of response. So it can be more competitive.
I was going to say, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I've been thinking about for most of the week, is that the lesson to be learned for Michigan from California, and that we're sort of teetering in that same direction, maybe not as severe, but for some of the same reasons, which is, if California's biggest complaint is, hey, not enough cities are opting in and you're having a dry county effect, Michigan's in the same boat. I mean, I play the game, you know, every day, is that if you go north from the 8 Mile border in Detroit into the thumb of Michigan, where are your retail centers? They're not. You get Utica, and then you're actually have to go west into Vassar, right? But if you live in the thumb proper, you have to go truly into Tuscola County, even into Lapeer, which is south, to really get cannabis. So you have, you know, probably 10 contiguous counties that are completely dry. And at 36 square miles, is that what it is for counties? I mean, you're talking 100 miles or more of a stretch without any cannabis access. And you want to ask why the black market's thriving. It's the same reason. It's like, you're going to drive 150 miles for a slice of pizza, or you're going to make one at home, or you're going to buy your neighbor's. Well, the answer is the same thing for cannabis. You can drive 125 miles for an overtaxed bag of weed, or you're going to get it from your buddy down the block.
Yeah.
You know, if you eliminate that market reality, if you eliminate the problem of access, which is what we've all been fighting for this, you know, this whole time, is for safe access. If you get to that point, and if you get, again, the reason that no one grows tobacco is because you can buy cigarettes every 200 feet. You know, if you don't want people buying or growing their own cannabis, or creating a traditional market for it, then make it easier to get.
You can brew your own beer. You can brew your own beer. You can make your own wine. Those are viable options, and people pass those around. I've had,
and you can grow your own tomatoes. You can make your own sauce and salsa and paste and all that stuff too. Or you can go to the store and grab it.
But I just interrupt. I broke a light bulb here. That's why it got dark here really quick for me, guys. I got a major mess here. I just want to say goodbye. I'll see.
Were you thinking kind of hard? It seems like. And
how many years bad luck is breaking a light bulb? None, I hope, because I've broken quite a few, actually. Although
I hear it's good luck in some places, right?
What?
It's just the beginning, right? It's silly to believe that they would try to stop caregivers from growing, and it wouldn't go directly to, you know, the adult use market. So I want people, just when they're talking to their legislators, to be careful when they're blaming the adult use growers, because that's just
I don't like that.
We already have to go through, right? That's
and that's next on the list. I mean,
absolutely.
These people were even admitting it. You know, that's a problem too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that, you know, to go back to the point of, okay, so is there a difference between a caregiver and let's say an adult grower, right? Considering what the penalties are for a violation, maybe not. right? The caregiver allows you to, let's just say, grow a lot more comfortably. If the challenge to, let's just say, the state law and essentially even to the MCMA is to, why don't you put your efforts into making it easier for cities to opt in that don't want to opt in? If you're talking about changing the law, why don't you change the law in a positive direction that manipulates more of the access or the resistance to getting these places in, so that you can create, let's just say, you can create the ability to overcome the hurdles of the old nags.
But Paul, I just have to say that the Anderson Economic Group was out earlier this year, and they said that most Michigan residents live within 20 miles of a regulated market right now. So at this point, it seems as if access to cannabis has pretty much been established for most of Michigan. That doesn't seem, in my mind, to be the limiting factor any longer.
But is it really? Because again, if you're in, let's say you are in Bad Axe, Michigan, you're not 20 miles from access.
Right.
Your next point of access really is Bay City or Vassar. And if you go even further to say you're in Hope Beach, I believe, which is along 25 there, you're even further. So the idea, I mean, again, if the population is to say we're all within 20 miles,
40% lives in Metro Detroit.
Right. That's always been the issue, and that's always been the focus of the MRA, was to say, how do we serve the rural folk, right? We understand and appreciate that the urban centers and the dense population areas are going to eventually have this, because you're going to have, let's say, progressive movements, and
those are the places where change typically happens first anyway.
Correct. But then taking that into, let's say, where land don't vote, into the area where there are still people and still population centers, but they're still kind of tied by, let's say, classic thinking. They still have the right to have some kind of access, and there still has to be some kind of, even if you call it like a 50-mile rule, like if you have a 50-mile radius and there's no safe cannabis access, there's got to be some kind of force that says, hey, in the same way that you would never have, for different market reasons, but you'd never have 100 miles to the nearest pharmacy. No one would ever allow for 100 miles to the nearest gas station or tobacco store or beer, right?
I'm wondering what statement Latrice is referring to. Is that the 20 mile thing?
The Anderson Economic Group's evaluation that most
I'm not sure what she's referring to. I'm kind of interested in it. I didn't mean to cut you off.
She's usually right, whatever she says. So
right now, so I'm kind of interested how we can exactly what she's talking about, so we can apply it to.
Right.
But that's, I mean, I always look at that as the issue is that, like, if we have 80% of the population that lives below Bay City or at or below Bay City, then you have.
Okay, she's talking about the Anderson Group assessment. Okay.
Yeah, and it was kind of sketchy the way that they determined it. By the way, they lumped a medical and recreational together so that they cast this wide net. We all know that there are some cities like Detroit that only allow medical and not recreational. So in that instance, it's hard to say that in that city that there's equal access for everyone, because only a small percentage of the population has medical cards. So
yeah, sorry, Paul, keep on getting.
No,
but that's
good
but that, God, the idea of, let's call it like the back door to that, Rick, is Detroit's approach, right? Detroit has no recreational marijuana, so that someone who lives, geographically centered of the city is driving more than 20 miles to get to 8 Mile or to River Rouge, to where there's actually a recreational marijuana place for the adults. But that's why the market thrives in places like that, and that's why the hookah bars and the like exist, because no one's going to leave city boundaries. No one's going to leave, they don't have the luxury of driving so far for such things. I mean, a lot of it's neighborhood stuff, and that's where the city of Detroit's dropping the ball in this same way. They're limiting access for the people who need it the most.
Well, I think Detroit mostly, Paul, I know that you live in Grosse Pointe. You're very familiar with the area, but I think most of Detroit is within 10 miles of something outside of the city itself. And we know that even in Western Wayne County, there are some communities that have recreational facilities that are actually very close to Detroit. So you could drive a short distance down 94 and get right to Dearborn or Dearborn Heights and find some facilities right along Michigan Avenue. So,
Well, and I have this issue going on with the city of Detroit right now, where in testimony last week, they came out and there's a task force of the building department and the Detroit Police Department where they're pursuing 84 or 85 unlicensed marijuana dispensaries
in the city of Detroit.
In the city of Detroit itself. 84 or 85 are on this list, and it's essentially as, let's call it, classic deli style mom and pop shop pop-ups.
What is the approach?
The approach is,
What are they charging them with?
well, it's all nuisance actions. So what they're doing is they're
all
going through
civil.
and they're right. Oh yeah, it's all classic McQueen stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't
They're
like
going-
the fact that people are getting harassed or whatever
That's
stuff,
all-
but like
all it
the
is.
fact they're not getting raided with
They're Chesterfield townshipping those people is what they're doing.
They're doing both. So
Yeah.
I've got a situation where they are raiding people, and they're going in there and they're raiding them classic style, raid team style, the whole bit, and they're writing them essentially misdemeanor tickets for improper operation of an unlicensed location. So it's a building code misdemeanor. So they're essentially putting teeth into building code, and procedurally what they're doing is they'll send in building code to double check and say, okay, is your use appropriate? Do you have a license? And if they get any guff or any resistance, they'll send in some cop to verify it or even do a controlled buy, and then they'll file a nuisance violation against it or write tickets and try to clear house.
No,
But usually they'll do the red tag and all that.
So for those people who aren't familiar with what Paul's referring to when he says doing the traditional raid team style, that's a bunch of guys all dressed in black with black masks over their faces with
it's a
big
paramilitary
vests
invasion.
on them. They have M16s. They kick in your door. The first thing they do is shoot any pets you have. If you have any pit bulls, forget it. I mean, I hate to say it, but Paul, is that not what we've seen over the years?
It's
First thing
They'll put a gun to the
it's
kid's
tragic.
head. There's nothing that's
exactly right. And the worst of this is that
Over a
because
misdemeanor.
drugs were illegal and it was cartel mentality stuff for the police, the training that these cops no longer have because they're not raiding grows all the time. It's essentially, again, to the man who only holds a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So these raid teams only have one speed. So they're raiding this unlicensed dispensary with the same training and approach and tools as if the place were a crack house.
Yelling and shouting and screaming and grabbing people and throwing them around and
shouldn't even do that for a crack house unless there was somebody in there who was like, held hostage or something like that.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. And Rick, to your point too about the dogs on the log sheets, right? So saving the officers the trouble of actually filling out a report. They have a 24-hour log sheet, which is just quick notes. And whenever they go someplace, there's like the basic and the top of the information. I've got it here, but I have to go get to another desk and get it. But the one of the lines present says dogs present, yes or no. And the next line says dogs shot, yes or no.
Oh my God, it happens so
it's-
often they had to create a form for it. God.
Yep. And it's one of those things where for the protocol of, okay, if there's a loose barking dog coming towards you, the presumption is it's not looking for a treat. And they use that same, in our training experience, we know that drug dealers use dogs to guard their drug houses. And
An
that's how they end up
alligator
shooting like 4 pound
in Birmingham.
Yeah, an alligator, right.
I was thinking about the alligator story, which was national news when they raided the place here in Oakland County. The police initially reported, and Sheriff Bouchard reported that they had an alligator guarding the grow. And as it turns out later on, photos indicated it was about a 1 foot long caiman
in like an aquarium. Yeah.
Right. So he totally took a snippet of information and blew it up into this gigantic, fantastical story. And the Associated Press and UPI just ate it right up. And
it's like Miami Vice, right?
Hey,
I know.
Before we totally lose,
this is Michigan, not a Cheech and Chong movie. Remember?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Classic.
Hey, before we totally lose Josie's attention because she's staring off into space right now and not paying attention.
She's talking to Josh Covert. I saw him walk past just a second ago.
Let's hit up GLEN a little bit and discuss how awesome it is working with all the 300 some applicants in various stages of process, and people such as Paul Tylenda really coming through in the Detroit area and organizing a lot of that stuff. Obviously, it's a concentrated area, and others who are really helping out, and how great that's starting to take off.
It's backed up. And I always say is that the testament to the success of the program in itself, not just the great work that GLEN's doing, but the availability and the broadness of people who can apply for expungements is shown by the fact that the state is now almost 6 months backed up. And getting to, the fact that they're overwhelmed with applications, to me, is great, because that means that A, they're eligible, they know about it, and B, that they've done what it takes to get to that step, right? To get to that next step, put yourself over the hump. And I tell you, every encounter I have with someone who has an expungement issue, it's like the top 3 of things to do in their life at this point. And I understand, right? It's that burden, it's that weight. It's even if it's just that psychological baggage that you carry with you. There's a lot that you can, it's a freedom issue, really.
Paul, do you think that because they're backed up at the state, that's more likely to result in more approvals, as they just want to try and get people through the system and not nitpick over detail?
Yes, and I tell you what, with the misdemeanor marijuana expungements too, I'm seeing a lot of those come back to me, because once those come back, they have 60 days, and unless they can show a compelling reason, it should just be automatic. And I can't, other than like your case of, you got into a car accident, you had 2 pounds of weed and your kids were in the car, or something completely obnoxious and improbable. Most of the cases are just possessory offenses, so that there isn't any, frankly, a lot of these don't even have police reports to say anything that there was a big to do about it, because most of these people with misdemeanor possession offenses are getting caught with pipes and joints and roaches in the ashtray and bags in their purse and things that likely don't even generate a police report.
We're talking about GLEN, Josey.
Yeah. So those types of things are coming back automatically, which is getting the system cleared out. Now, hopefully we'll see more automatic returns, let's just say decisions without a hearing, which is where Wayne County is moving towards. Wayne County is moving towards if we have the paperwork and the judge can't find a reason to have a hearing, we'll just send you the approval. And that's,
so they're not making you wait the 30 or 60 days. They're just,
they will, but you don't have to have the hearing necessarily.
Okay.
So
right.
The biggest hang up in the process is getting a response back from the Attorney General's office. So when you mail the application in, the Attorney General essentially then double checks your homework and says, yeah, we have an opinion on this. And the opinion is he's eligible. You make the decision. He's ineligible for these reasons. So, it's just the time and process. And my understanding is they have 3 or 4 people working on these applications, and they're seeing, several hundred a day that come in.
How much ineligibility is there, and how good is the reasoning when you see it?
Some of the, I haven't seen any ineligibility returns so far. I've seen one in error, that they had a different conviction date than the actual conviction date. So they said, no, you're not eligible because of the time frame. The ones that I anticipate that you'll see the denials on, or the ineligibility, are going to come from your one bad night expungements, which are if you have X amount of offenses within a 24-hour period, they'll treat it as, let's call it, one file. And I've got several clients that have that one bad night experience, but the nature of their offenses are excluded from the statute. So because they have an offense that was deemed violent, or is included under the violent offenses, even though we wouldn't necessarily consider it a violent act, they're excluded in total, so that expunging 2 of 3 felonies isn't really the result that you want. You're still saddled with one.
Is it on the local level? Is it the judge's opinion whether or not it, or I know it ultimately is, but that's just up to the judge right on the surface? Okay, so I thought maybe a prosecutor might have to challenge it if they really.
Prosecutors can object. So I had a situation where the prosecutor objected to my guy's 25-year-old conviction, and the judge took it to heart. And I was giving him all the legal reasonings. He was like, look, you're kind of going back too far and considering things too far. And then the judge was going down the road of going to deny the application because my client had picked up a traffic offense 20 years ago. and was saying, no, you're ineligible because you didn't clear the time period. I'm saying, actually, according to the AG's office, he did, and he's eligible on both. But I can see that you're about to deny my application, so I'm just going to withdraw it. And you prevent the judge from denying the application, which then puts you on a waiting list, right? You can't reapply for over a year, or 3 years in some events. So it prevents that decision from being entered, and then you can control that calendar.
Can you
So
appeal
now
the denial?
you can appeal them.
Mhm.
You can appeal, but like, it's a, you know, if I can pull it for free rather than having to make a decision and appeal back with a gamble, I can then control when I go back into court. So now for this client, I can go and eliminate that driving offense first, and then go back to court and say, aha, now he has no record. He's got 25 years of clean. You can't, you know, you have to think a little harder if you want to hold it against me. But again, with some of these judges, I mean, we've all been there where the prosecutor says boo, and the judge is like, oh, well, he's right. Prosecutor's point got a great point. And then you're like, enough of you. I'm going to withdraw the petition here. I'm going to go, you know, I'll wait the time frame and go from there.
Yeah, because they do golf every Sunday, and they're in the same court them each week, the prosecutor and the judges.
Yeah, you're
is
not
the
going to
real
upset
story.
someone that sits across from you every day. No one wants to do that. That's not reality. But that, you know, it's working, and I'm seeing efficiency out of it. I'm seeing prosecutors who are, let's just say, over it, right? Because there's no challenge. You're eligible, you're not, to them.
Yeah.
And for them, it's just like, yeah, he seems eligible, so we don't care.
Has
right?
there been a challenge? Just, I mean, has anybody?
I had in Oakland County, and it was this 25-year-old case I was telling you about, and it had to do with a gun in a trunk at a high school after hours. And that, okay, that's not a great place to start, right? That set of facts doesn't help you. But the prosecutor argued Columbine, which was like 4 years later, right? Argued all of these things and completely contradicted the police report, you know, and there was this whole made this big to do, and made my fairly vanilla client out to be a gangster, which is, it's kind of unfair. And it was really to the point where it's just like, it's been 25 years. Like, this didn't happen last year. I'm not even saying this happened 5 years ago and I'm just 1 week eligible. I'm saying this guy is, you know, 45 now. Not even, no, he was 17 when it happened. So just freshly an adult. But that's the kind of stuff where I think that certain judges believe that they have this spotlight on them. And they, I can't be easy on expungements. I can't let someone have a second chance. And it's still weird. It's still a weird sort of a spotlight issue for them. But a lot of them are pushing it through. Like I said, some of the big city courts are just like, oh, it's a set aside. Okay, anything you want to say? Any objection? Okay, anything here? No, here you go. I have one in Jackson where it was an AG case, and the judge said, prosecutor, any objection? The prosecutor's like, I can't object. It's not my case. It's the AG's case. The AG said he's good, so you got to grant it. And that was it. The judge's like, all right, granted. So it really depends on, you know, I think some judges like to read everything in the record. Some judges like to pat themselves on the back. Some judges like to make, you know, a display out of everything. So, you know your arena. And sometimes the worst of it is the judge that I had in this 25-year-old case was like the third judge, because the original judge had like died, right? The next one had retired, and this guy's brand new and he's got something to prove. So
plus a whole lot of old material to read through in order to be fresh on the case. So what a drag that had to be for him.
But you're seeing stuff now. I had one done in middle of the state that was a marijuana, was a 2 deliveries, like a grower that got busted, you know, in 2010. And the judges was like, oh, okay, so no objections to the marijuana case. Okay, we're going to grant this. Because it's not, you know, it used to be before they changed these laws. You have to go in there and tell the judge why you wanted the expungement. You have to kind of prove yourself. And I used to have like clients go in there and be like, I really want to take my kid fishing in Canada. And like sob stories of like how difficult it's been. I've made such a good life and it's followed me my whole life. And it's just like, now they're just like, oh, you're eligible, just go. Because the policy, the reason why the law exists,
less, right?
Yeah, it's known, right? Like the attitude towards it now legally is, the presumption is, as long as you're eligible, just get it done.
And eligibility for that is to a great degree being provided by the Attorney General's office, you're saying, right? The AG?
Yes. And sometimes, and the funny part about it is there are forms, and you submit these things on these state approved forms, which is great because sometimes that makes it really easy. All you got to do is check some things and fill in some boxes. The hard part is that the forms don't necessarily jive with how the law works. So Josey and I have dealt with situations where you have to file 2 forms on the same person for 2 different cases because each file is independently eligible. So you fight it that way rather than having to check one box that I can't check because both cases don't apply, right? So I could just have to kind of work my way around the paperwork to comply with the statute. And when you call the AG's office has a very positive attitude towards these acts. Again, for the policy reasons, which is like, if you're eligible, you're eligible. And, if you can clear these hurdles, because they've determined, or they understand that if you are ineligible, it's because those crimes are serious and we don't want you to not have that on your record. Whereas everything else is
Great.
eligible, so get it gone, right? So all drug offenses are eligible and things like that.
Josey, is Paul doing a lot of the applicants?
He's doing everyone in Metro Detroit, with the exception of Oakland County. Some of our our clients are at Barton's, who we saw earlier. We did have a few clients with Cannabis Council, but the bulk, all of it in Metro Detroit, is Paul.
I saw Josh Covert walking around earlier too. Josh does a lot of your stuff in Lansing, eh?
Yes, so Josh and Josh's firm, Covert Law Firm, and Ashley Patricius. Oh God, don't tell her. But is here, and she's doing a lot of the traveling out here as well. We do share an office with Redemption here as well, so it's a good hub for all the foundations. I'm really excited to have Paul on. He's doing so much work for the Great Lakes Expungement Network.
And that was the spot at the telethon where $24,000 was raised. Paul was on there.
That's awesome.
Sons and daughters. Josey was
What a
on
great
there.
night. Yes.
GLEN, and
That's great.
yeah.
You can donate to GLEN on Facebook now. You can make it your Facebook fundraiser. So, any of my Capricorn friends. Thank you guys for having me on. Thanks for talking about GLEN and Sons and Daughters. I'm so excited to see Paul. And I was excited to see Barton too. That was another guy who's working on Great Lakes Expungement Network.
Yeah.
It's like got a huge echo in the room, so I feel like I'm whispering.
You're in an old house with a lot of wood.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
Plaster, high ceiling.
Well, that's a really cool offices there, man. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
it's a nice place.
Well, happy solstice, Josey. The days only get longer from here on out, so that's wonderful news.
Yeah, thank you.
More daylight.
Another year coming up. Will be even better next year.
What's that website address for GLEN, or you said just the Facebook page, right?
The Great Lakes Expungement Network, or GreatLakesExpungementNetwork.org.
Great.
Sons and
You
daughters.
can
United.
apply online there, and you can also donate online there. So GreatLakesExpungementNetwork.org/donate. We're pretty creative. Please go get your record expunged. Show it to your friends. We're paying all of the bills. It's provided all over the state. So we have attorneys in the west side, best side, and also, all the way down to Paul on the east side.
The east
Buddy-
side. I love it. I grew up
Buddy
with that.
Dalton reminds us to encourage everybody to show up at the Dexter
The Dexter
Township
meeting
hearing
tonight.
tonight at 7 p.m. Talking about this incredibly terrible ordinance. It is a second reading this evening, which means they could very well vote on it. Make sure that your voice is heard and try and get the good
Hey,
word out.
and then if they try to enforce it, you could call somebody such as Paul Tylenda to say, hey, you can't make somebody have 5 acres of land first before they can carry out what's allowed by state law. That's in their ordinance. You have to own 5 acres of land to grow in your basement.
Yeah, Barton
Can
suggested
you challenge that
injunctive,
one?
Barton suggested injunctive relief, Paul. Barton would be a great guy to do that. Injunctive relief, the way
Yeah,
to go.
that's
Yeah.
that would be. I mean, they're certainly adding more restrictions than state law has, which is
So is it like
You know.
something like you have to have 5 acres to have something really be qualified as agricultural? Then it's got to be agricultural in order to do that, even if it's going to be inside your house. Or is there some leap there that they're getting?
that's what they're going for. So some of these towns have a 5 acre minimum for certain definitions, or certainly like a 5 acre maximum for other ones. But God, it's so sticky. And I mean, really, you would get into who just did this? Who's got I think it's Shelby Township, right? So the no more than 200 square feet,
Oh yeah.
right? Which that one I think has better wings than your 5 acre requirement, because the minimums can be economic hurdles, whereas maximums are fair, right? No more than doesn't mean that you have to have something to do it, right? Minimum of, or at least, implies economic hurdles, and that's actually more actionable than something else.
Socioeconomically discriminatory as well.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I wanted
It's
to talk.
an equal protection issue.
I wanted to get. We're at the end here. I did want to bring up the Viridis stuff though too. The motion for reconsideration was denied. Well, just real quick. I'm sorry, I got to do it because motion for reconsideration was denied. Judge says, though, you have to allow all that cannabis to go back on the shelf, even if it failed microbial testing. And it's not like I'm not ruling on that. That's not part of my rule. And then as an assumption that the regular rules and the metric system, all that kind of stuff would flag something that's failed testing and then get it out of the system as regular. They actually made them bypass that stuff in the system so that it could go back. And I think there's a system in place that has to go down if somebody's going to buy it or something like that.
So we're getting into the disclosure forms again.
Yeah,
right?
I think for that particular kind of product,
Well,
so
certainly
retailers shouldn't even want to deal with
you need to
that.
create a paper record for it, because you can't run it through metric, and then you have to submit all of that back to the MRA so they can manually enter the transfer of product, because the system is specifically designed to not let them do what they're trying to do.
Which that it's going to create, right? And I can see, okay, so on a legal standpoint, right? It's the legal issue is open the door and put the elephant in the refrigerator, right? That's the problem. That's problem solved, right? Now you're left with the practical issue of how the fuck do we get the elephant inside the refrigerator, which is where the MRA's whole tangling is. Their motion for reconsideration, it's a standard legal step once you lose something like that. But it was also a way for them to try to, again, regain a victory, but also for them to be able to regain control, because the judge's ruling is essentially, okay, yeah, this stuff goes back in the market, and then they're complaining about the, essentially now you're bypassing a regulatory requirement, which is this using metric and complying with metric, complying with the standards, complying with the with the rules.
Right.
So now it goes back to this question that we've always asked, which is who's on the hook?
So no court order requires retailers to sell it. I mean, if there's a product liability situation, you could go back on the retailer and say, you knew that it was bad because you had to use this special way of selling it because it was outside the metric system. It's impossible for you to claim that you did not know you were selling something that had failed testing. So if there's any liability, it's got to be on the retailer, because that was the option they took at that particular time, especially if they didn't notify the purchaser.
Yeah, right. Because now you can't say it was accidental or there was this, now it really is what you're doing, you know what you're doing with it. And I think that, again, forces the hand of the owners of that cannabis to do the right thing. And maybe that's what the MRA is essentially.
The retailers are going to have to not put it back on the shelf. And why even give somebody the option of that? It seems like a weird.
And the MRA is going to know exactly who sold it, because they have to go through this extraordinary process in order to handle those transactions. So every one of those transactions they have to use through that method is a sale that someone made of cannabis they knew to be bad. So they'll know exactly who did it. Now, whether or not they'll release that information to the public remains to be seen. Paul, that seems like that would be really detrimental to the MRA if they were to do that, right?
It's a huge hit to the program, because essentially what's learned here is that, hey, there is a way around the MRA. And even if that is, which in my mind, it should have been the court says, okay, Viridis wins this decision. MRA does not win their motion for reconsideration. The stuff goes back into the stream, but it has to comply with the
Right. That's
commerce, which that is the way that it should be. And that isn't prejudicial, but it's an acknowledgement that the Viridis testing for that material was done correctly, even if the allegation is that it wasn't, or even if the pudding says that it's not.
As we talked about on this show earlier, just because it tests negative,
not that it was done correctly.
now,
Nobody's saying that it was done
right? It
incorrect.
doesn't mean that Viridis did anything wrong just because it tests positive now, because it's been through so many hands, it's been repackaged, and it's been on the shelf for so long. So Viridis says, not my problem, but I'm still wanting you to sell this bad cannabis. The MRA says, not my problem. We tried to stop them from selling the bad cannabis, but the courts made us do it. The court says, not my problem, because that wasn't an issue that I took under consideration when I made the decision. So who's left as the gatekeeper to whether or not that enters the bloodstream of you and me? That's the retailer.
It's the capitalist.
It has to eat the cost too.
Yeah,
It's
it's
decide
tough.
it's not worthy having that image of putting that.
We've
shit back
estimated
on.
it might be as much as $30 million too, based on if half of the recall was Viridis North and if 27% of it failed, it was roughly 30 million, something like that.
And if this becomes an insurance issue, which is to say, okay, the retailers eat it, the retailers then say, I have an insurance claim to make, right? Rather than a lawsuit, because even if that's a lawsuit, the loser is going to file the insurance claim. So I have the insurance claim to make based on a products liability issue, which is one of the specific insurances that you have to have as a licensee. And I'm going to cash in on that. And is that just is that an individual issue, like you have a car accident and your car insurance goes up, or because there was a recall, all of a sudden, next year's insurance premiums are double, triple, quadruple what they are now across the board, which increases operating cost, and now the price of pot goes up because the liability cost in carrying pot goes up for the insurers.
And does the insurance company have anybody they can go after? Oftentimes insurance companies like to pay out, but then countersue for the damages they experienced. It seems like Viridis is insulated, right?
They are, and as would be the MRA to a large degree, because everybody's going to be just like, look, I'm filing a court order. I'm filing a court order. And that, would in the same court would function as a kind of an absolute defense, really. But even down the road, I think that any judge in any court is going to be like, that's a court order. They were following what the judge told them to do. And if they didn't, they'd have problems. So you're suggesting that them risking their butts in a show cause for failing to follow a court's order somehow created some action to sue. Like, I just don't think that, and that's where the insurance company might be left at a dead end by saying, okay, well, all roads point to government immunity.
So if an insurance company has a big payout and they don't have anybody they can sue to recoup any of that money, then next year's premiums do go up, right, Paul?
Yep. And that's the question: are they your premiums or are they our premiums? And that's the biggest risk, because now that I don't know how product liability insurers think, but if their thinking was like everybody else's, like product liability in cannabis, it's a fucking plant. There's no really concern about it. Now they're like, oh fuck, it's a mold issue, it's a health issue, it's a it's a causation issue that is going down the road of like this mesothelioma type of lawsuit where it's like, were you around? Did you smoke moldy cannabis? You may be entitled to compensation. It's the same shit. And that's a hit that it's a PR problem for everybody. And it's just a hurdle, because I'm begging to hear the damages, like someone who's actually affected by this, the damages, the loss, and then how they try to remedy that. Because some of them might just eat it and be like, fuck it. $5,000 $5,000 of plant or $5,000 of material or $10,000 of material, $20,000 of material for one grow might be just a, you know.
But the distribution manager for Loom Cannabis was involved in the court hearing on the court of claims, and he said they had thousands and thousands of packages that were affected by this recall. Now, again, realizing that not all of them may have failed testing, only a certain percentage of them, a certain percentage of thousands and thousands still represents an awful lot of cannabis.
Yeah, very few have the scale of Loom to work with.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, so what we really should wrap it up, although I'm glad that we did take 10 more minutes to talk about that, because I kind of feel like we resolved that conversation a little bit more.
Josie stuck with us the whole time because she's a champ.
She loves listening to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I watch every Tuesday. Thank you.
Where's your mom? Where's Brenda?
She's doing deliveries for the holiday drive.
All right. We saw Grandma Jean out there doing that. She's posting some of
Yeah, she did all of our Muskegon stuff.
really cool.
You know, she has like 2 master's degrees in smokes. Now she does smoke hollow weed too, but
And she worked as hard as anybody during the legalization process
it's
and
incredible.
put in lots of hours.
I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, we have a great team. I mean, there's so many winners. Everywhere you look, there's an example of excellence, no doubt.
Thanks for
Anything else you want to wrap up with, Josie?
No, thanks for having me on. Thanks for being patient with me the whole time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're awesome. Paul, how about you? Anything final?
Say, give cannabis as a gift this Christmas. Just go shop somewhere. Spread the good word. Spread the goodwill. Spread the charm. Everybody have fun.
Turn some more people onto it.
I'd like to have Paul elected as Santa Claus. That would be
Yeah.
the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I've been Santa Claus more than once in my life.
You don't have
Once
the
for a
belly
scholarship.
for it. Yeah.
And that's what the.
Well, you can't have people sit in your lap this year, so you're like, no, what's the point?
I wish we weren't out of time because that begs a story.
Something about the North Pole. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, right. All right.
Hey, so but thanks to Jim and Jim Salame and Adam Brook and attorney Barton Morris, and definitely thanks to Josey and Paul. And another good one next year, or next show, we'll talk about a lot of stuff that happened throughout the year and reflect upon some things, and then maybe start talking about what's going on for the beginning of next year.
Right.
So with that, I guess, Rick, if you don't mind.
I don't really have anything philosophical to say today other than just a thanks to all the people in the comment section who continue to keep the conversation lively with your information and with your questions. Really helps the broadcast when we have a lot of folks participating like that. So thanks again. Definitely tune in next week to catch our year-end recap and our projections of what we're going to do in 2022. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Talk to you soon.